Are all African leaders truly working for the benefit of their people, or are some serving foreign interests? In reality, many African leaders act in the interests of powerful external forces. These dynamics become especially evident when regional alliances like the Confederation of Sahel States take shape. Recently, President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso made headlines when he publicly rejected two countries from joining the Sahel Confederation, exposing how these nations were aligned with Western agendas. But which countries were excluded, and what were Traoré's reasons for doing so? Let's take a closer look. President Traoré recently revealed important details about the evolving Sahel Confederation, a regional union currently comprising Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. His announcement not only identified two West African nations that would not be included in the Confederation, but also hinted at the next country set to join. The Sahel Confederation is based on a shared vision of cultural and economic alignment, as well as a commitment to resisting foreign interference. Traoré's long-term goal is to foster African unity through the creation of a balanced and fair union, one built on mutual respect and common ground, rather than economic disparities or foreign control. As part of this vision, only nations with similar economic conditions and cultural values will be considered for inclusion. This approach rules out countries like Ghana and Ivory Coast, despite their geographical proximity. Their more developed economies and distinct socio-cultural structures don't align with the goals of the Confederation. According to Traoré, these countries tried to join the Union, not out of shared purpose, but as part of a larger strategy to maintain elite control over African leadership. Burkina Faso rejected their entry, unwilling to support systems that perpetuate elite dominance and neo-colonial ties. Traoré's stance also reflects his broader aim to liberate Burkina Faso from foreign economic influence, particularly from France. By excluding wealthier, more Western-aligned countries from the Union, he hopes to prevent internal inequality and promote a truly sovereign alliance. This decision aligns with his grassroots approach to governance and development. He envisions a confederation grounded in cultural unity and economic parity, free from the grip of external exploitation. The exclusion of countries like Ghana and Ivory Coast sends a strong message. Any nation enabling continued French influence may not be compatible with the Confederation's goals. Still, it's worth examining in more detail. Why exactly were Ivory Coast and Ghana rejected? Ivory Coast, or Côte d'Ivoire, was under French colonial rule from the 1840s until gaining independence in 1960. However, France's political and economic influence never truly disappeared. Despite formal independence, French interests continued to shape the country's development. French involvement in the region dates back centuries. By the mid-1600s, France had begun building connections near the Gold Coast, establishing missions in 1687 and forts by 1701. During the scramble for Africa, Ivory Coast became a French protectorate in 1843 and a formal colony in 1893. Throughout this period, France aggressively expanded its control, promoting its language and culture in an attempt to assimilate Ivorians as Black French. This deep-rooted legacy of colonialism is one of the key reasons Ivory Coast has remained under heavy French influence, and why Traoré sees it as incompatible with the Sahel Confederation's vision. Through policies of assimilation and dominance, France sought to deeply entrench Ivory Coast within its colonial empire. These strategies allowed France to exert full control over the country's administration, economy, and cultural identity, particularly capitalizing on Ivory Coast's rich agricultural sector for its own benefit. Even after the country gained independence in 1960, France's grip didn't loosen. Ivory Coast remained heavily tied to France politically and economically. One key indicator of this continued influence is the use of the CFA franc, a currency tied to the euro and backed by the French treasury. demonstrating France's ongoing role in the country's financial affairs. In contrast, Ghana, formerly the British colony of the Gold Coast, gained independence in 1957. Unlike France's direct rule in Ivory Coast, Britain employed an indirect governance strategy in Ghana, often working through local leaders. Though both countries experienced European colonialism, the nature and depth of that influence were different. Ghana's indirect colonial experience led to a different post-colonial path compared to Ivory Coast's. Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Now, let's dive deeper. France continued to exert influence in the region through mechanisms like the Council of the Entente, formed in 1959 with Ivory Coast as a founding member. This institution aimed to promote economic collaboration among French-speaking West African nations and solidify French power in the region, including over countries like Ghana. Despite their differing colonial histories, both Ghana and Ivory Coast still bear the lasting marks of European cultural and economic control. These colonial legacies have shaped the unique national identities and economic structures of both countries, setting them apart from the culturally and economically aligned members of the Sahel Confederation. President Traoré's decision to exclude Ivory Coast from the Confederation stems from France's ongoing influence, particularly through tools like the CFA franc. The Confederation is envisioned as a coalition free from foreign domination, one built on shared cultural roots and similar economic standing. Thus, the exclusion of Ghana and Ivory Coast is grounded in a desire to form a union of equals, free from the distortions caused by historical exploitation and modern external pressures. A decade ago, there may have been no issue, but today the situation is different. Côte d'Ivoire, though stable and a trading partner, is also increasingly seen as part of a Western-aligned security agenda that doesn't fit the Confederation's anti-colonial ethos. Burkina Faso, under President Ibrahim Traoré's leadership, has firmly rejected French control and neo-colonial policies. His administration has consistently spoken out against France's lingering presence in the region, accusing it of undermining national sovereignty and reinforcing economic dependency. The Burkina public has strongly supported this stance, viewing it as essential to achieving real independence and national dignity. Meanwhile, Ivory Coast and Ghana have taken different approaches. Ivory Coast continues to maintain deep political and economic ties with France. Many Ivorians see this as a threat to national sovereignty, especially amid allegations that French influence is behind some of the country's actions in Burkina Faso. Actions seen by some as attempts to weaken the Burkina government's anti-colonial position. Ghana, on the other hand, has developed warm diplomatic relations with France. Its leadership often highlights the benefits of this relationship, citing developmental aid, educational programs, and investment partnerships. However, critics argue that this alignment with French and broader Western interests puts Ghana at odds with the Pan-African ideals championed by the Sahel Confederation. This stark contrast in political ideology and foreign relations explains why Ghana and Ivory Coast are not seen as compatible with Burkina Faso's vision for a self-reliant, united Africa. While Burkina Faso pushes for African-led solutions and independence from foreign influence, Ghana and Ivory Coast appear content maintaining their long-standing partnerships with former colonial powers. The divide in West Africa highlights critical questions about regional cooperation and the potential for a unified stand against neo-colonialism. Turning our focus to Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traoré has issued serious allegations against France, accusing the former colonial ruler of actively working to destabilize the country. He claims to have concrete evidence that France, with the help of Ivory Coast and Benin, is undermining Burkina Faso's stability. According to Traoré, France has even set up 2 secret military bases in Benin, with intentions to launch attacks against Burkina Faso. The deliberate exclusion of Ghana and Ivory Coast from the Sahel Confederation helps maintain the ideological and strategic balance of the Union. At the same time, it leaves the door open for countries that align more closely with the Confederation's cultural and economic principles, such as Chad. Chad has recently emerged as a prospective member of the Sahel Confederation. Following discussions with Chad's Minister of Culture, President Traoré extended an invitation for Chad to join. Although Chad is not a part of ECOWAS, its strong cultural and regional ties with existing Confederation members make it a natural fit. Chad's inclusion would signal a meaningful shift in the region's geopolitical dynamics and underscore the importance of cultural unity and shared purpose in shaping the Confederation's expansion. There are several reasons why Chad's entry into the Sahel Confederation would be significant. Firstly, Chad shares many cultural, historical, and socio-economic similarities with the current members, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. These commonalities would reinforce the cohesion and influence of the Confederation. Secondly, incorporating Chad would enhance the Union's resistance to foreign interference and economic exploitation, aligning with Traoré's vision of an independent and equitable alliance. Chad's security situation also mirrors that of its neighbors, as it grapples with terrorism and internal conflicts. Joining the Confederation could foster a coordinated approach to addressing these challenges, enhancing collective defense and regional stability. A core aim of the Sahel Confederation is solidarity in the face of shared threats, and Chad's membership would amplify that principle. By anchoring the Confederation in shared identity and mutual support, President Traoré seeks to build a regional bloc that is self-reliant and resilient against external manipulation. Chad's potential role underscores the importance of these cultural and regional bonds in strengthening the Confederation's foundation and influence. To fully grasp President Traoré's vision, it's essential to understand the anti-colonial philosophy driving it. His ambition for the Sahel Confederation is rooted in a firm rejection of French neocolonial influence in West Africa. Traoré advocates for a bottom-up model of governance, denouncing French-style constitutional frameworks imposed during the colonial era. He believes that the people of Burkina Faso should be empowered to shape their own government, potentially through African-inspired governance systems that reflect local traditions and values more closely than Western democratic models. This anti-colonial approach is deeply woven into the very fabric of the Confederation's founding and growth. Traoré emphasizes constitutional reforms that prioritize public participation, ensuring the creation of a government that is not only representative, but also responsive to the aspirations of its citizens. His goal is to foster a union rooted in equity and mutual respect. Traoré also envisions a confederation that is politically and economically autonomous. By excluding countries like Ghana and Ivory Coast, whose economies are heavily tied to former colonial powers, he aims to prevent the risk of economic imperialism within the Union and ensure a more balanced and respectful partnership among member states. His broader mission of cutting ties with French imperialism aligns with the Confederation's foundation of shared values and mutual protection. As previous African leaders have observed, the struggle today is no longer the overt slavery or colonization of the past. It is the modern version of control, terrorism, economic dependency, and geopolitical manipulation. Traoré frames this as the new battleground in Africa's ongoing quest for liberation and sovereignty. Understanding the Sahel Confederation's strategy for addressing security challenges is crucial to grasping the deeper anti-colonial sentiments that shape President Traoré's political agenda. The Sahel region has faced severe security threats for over a decade, particularly in the form of armed insurgencies and terrorism. Since 2012, Traoré has been outspoken in his criticism of ECOWAS and its Western allies, particularly France, for what he sees as their inadequate and ineffective response to terrorism in the region. In contrast, Burkina Faso, under Traoré's leadership, has taken bold steps to fortify its national defense. One of the most notable efforts is the mobilization of nearly 100,000 civilian volunteers to support the country's military forces. This initiative not only boosts national security, but also reflects Traoré's grassroots approach, empowering ordinary citizens to play a direct role in defending their homeland. The Sahel Confederation builds upon this foundation by proposing a collective security strategy rooted in self-reliance and mutual aid. Traoré's vision emphasizes regional cooperation over external intervention. Rather than depending on foreign powers, the Confederation aims to pool resources, share intelligence, and coordinate military efforts among member states. This united front is intended to counter common threats, protect sovereignty, and enhance regional stability. Central to this strategy is the principle of solidarity. Security is not treated as an individual state's problem, but as a shared responsibility across the Confederation. This sense of unity ensures that when one member is under threat, others will respond, not out of obligation to international alliances, but out of mutual respect and a shared destiny. Furthermore, this security framework is deeply intertwined with the Confederation's broader anti-colonial ideology. Traoré's insistence on independence from foreign military and economic control reflects a rejection of the neocolonial systems that continue to shape African geopolitics. By creating a union based on cultural and economic affinity, the Sahel Confederation reinforces its ability to resist manipulation and maintain internal stability on its own terms. The approach is clear. Through cooperation, cultural solidarity, and mutual protection, the Confederation aims to build a strong, self-sustaining bloc free from external interference. But this raises complex and uncomfortable questions. Should the Confederation allow any country to join, regardless of its historical alliances or current foreign affiliations? Does it benefit the Union to deny membership to nations whose political and economic structures are still deeply entangled with former colonial powers? Can a Pan-African movement truly flourish if some African governments continue to prioritize relationships with France and other Western nations over regional solidarity? Are all African nations genuinely working toward African unity, or are some simply appeasing foreign powers for political convenience? These are the pressing questions that define not only the future of the Sahel Confederation, but the broader struggle for African sovereignty and self-determination. The answers may well determine whether the continent can forge a new path, or remain tethered to the legacy of colonialism. Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed, you're becoming part of a movement dedicated to reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change. Thanks for watching.